Self-reflection leads to experiences that fundamentally change the relationship to yourself and reality. People think that self-reflection is some simple cognitive ability that helps you to be more self-aware or understand yourself better, something that helps you develop as a person. But shockingly, it is not that simple. If you self-reflect for long enough, you break reality apart. I spent years of my life self-reflecting, and it almost costed me my sanity. Now I help other people through their self-reflective journey and try to help them not losing their grip of reality. Because it doesn't matter if you want to frame it through psychology or science or spirituality, but something incredible is going on when you have a sense of self. The relationship to the self is a deeply profound thing. There's something existentially quite troubling about it too. So consider this as a warning. I will go in depth on what self-reflection really leads you to. Self-reflection is the ability to witness and evaluate one's own cognitive, emotional, and behavioral processes. We take this ability for granted as humans, but this level of self-referentiality is odd. It's more than just simple awareness. It's a sort of meta-awareness that uses language to reference to itself. And we can think about this on different levels. On one level, you know you are breathing, even if I don't reference to it. But you're not really aware that you're breathing. You're not actively thinking about it or exerting effort for it. But now that I've mentioned that you're breathing, suddenly you become aware of it in an experiential sense. It happens automatic, and now that we point to it, something within you is moving its attention to your breath. And you notice that normally it happens automatically, but now suddenly this awareness changes the relationship to your own breath. It might even be a bit difficult right now to breathe because now you're just so self-referential about it. You're so aware about it in this meta-cognitive linguistical way. But now you can focus on the fact that you're breathing, and you can tell me that you can feel your breath right now. This way, we've engaged in some sort of self-reflection. And you've identified a sensation in your body and reflected it back at yourself, and then used language, either verbally or in your mind, to zoom in on it. But now what happens if you do this all the time with everything that is going on in your perception and in your mind? Because it's not just the breath that happens automatically, but literally every single thing in your experience happens automatically. Like blinking, for example. It is just something that the body does, and you're not aware of it at all. And now you notice it, and then you think, isn't it kind of weird that we just get blind for like a few microseconds every few seconds? What if you're aware that all of existence is just this odd automatic state? The fact that all happens on its own and your sense of control is pretty much questionable. The breathing your body does on its own, like the blinking and the heart pumping. But it's all other senses too. And not just all other senses, but all of reality just happens on its own. It doesn't need you at all. And then if you reflect on this again and again, on all these different layers and aspects, it becomes quite maddening. Because eventually, it will lead you to mind-boggling realizations. Who or what is it that reflects on its own awareness? What is this self noticing that it has a body, or a thought, or a head, or is breathing? Is the breath breathing itself? Where is the identity located that actually does this thing? This recursive loop becomes a mirror that reflects itself endlessly. The self noticing itself, wondering about itself, explaining itself, thinking itself, making a video about it, and untangling this existential mess. And when you keep going into this recursive loop, what ends up happening is that you start to question if reality is even real. if you really exist, and what does it mean for the self to die? Because you're not actually just interfacing with some loose aspect of yourself. You're interfacing with the entire structure of reality itself. Now, this might sound like a big claim for some, because it's easy to say that it's not really reality. It's just your own mind interacting with itself. But it's just the mind, it's just thoughts. Or it's just some loose perception of the body, but it's not what really the body is made out of. But no, think about it deeper. When you say reality, what you're interfacing with is also just this notion of perception. You're always, without exception, interfacing with your ability to be aware. And when you say things like reality, you're ultimately talking about your own perception of reality, meaning your own sense of self. So what happens is that if you introspect into all aspects of the self, all sensations, all feelings, all thoughts, all beliefs, all ideologies, all past memories and future worries, all instances of existence, now all of a sudden, none of it feels real. And all of it appears as some illusion of the head, an illusion of the mind. By this act of repetition and recursive thinking, you reveal the self-constructed nature of all of reality, and therefore break reality apart. Now, this is where the danger really starts, because there is an existential breakthrough that happens that is not very common for many people in their stages of development, because it doesn't feel like development. It feels like you're going insane. You feel like you've either glimpsed something magical that you weren't supposed to see about the nature of truth or reality, or depending on your mental architecture, you might feel relieved to see that the self wasn't real as this singular, solid, definable thing. Or it might truly be horrifying as you suddenly realize that the entire concept of your human viewpoint is completely arbitrary. That everything that ever mattered to you never mattered in this solid, touchable way. But through this self-reflection, you actually have the opportunity to become existentially free in ways most people are not aware of. Because most people run on autopilot, and they're not aware enough to see how much power there really lies in being a human. Because generally, it is not pleasant to go this deep. It makes you really want to confront the truth, or you really have to want to confront the truth in order to, go this deep into yourself. And most people would rather keep surface level, as reality feels more comfortable this way. But sooner or later, everybody gets hit with some existential conundrum, either be it through the death of somebody we love, or be it through another traumatic event. And then we are forced to question what the self is, and there's not really going back from there. There are a lot of existential questions that usually come up once reality has been deconstructed in this way. When you see that there's something very subjective and fluid about yourself, then there's a lot of confusion that starts to emerge about what is morality really? Is morality real? Is there such a thing as free will, or am I just determined to be on autopilot forever? Why are you in your own body and not in another person's body? And there are actual answers to these questions. And what they require is deeper and more self-reflection. The issue is that most people don't do it in the right way, and they keep spiraling in their own mind, and they never actually move deeper, but they just torture themselves in some intellectual madness, in just thinking, in a way that doesn't help you to actually reveal the layer that is underneath the logical mind. And a lot of existential self-reflection on these deeper levels is to really look at your own mind in novel ways, which often implies to notice how you're still lying to yourself, how much is still constructed that you have not yet recognized as a construction. The moment you truly understand and process all of the self, then the self-reflection stops, creating this existential comfort. Because this unease with life and reality is part of this self-referential loop that just doesn't accept reality. And it muddies everything. It makes everything unclear because no matter what you're looking at, you can always doubt it. You can have a perception and then wonder, is this actually reality? Is it a real perception or is it just in my mind? And since you know how consciousness is so subjective, well, now, is there any truth at all? Am I just lost in the sea of existence? If you sense the depth from which I'm talking about and you understand that this is the real deal, then I'd ask you to share this video with someone who would benefit from this message. Also, liking and subscribing does genuinely help my work out immensely. I also offer a community and a one-on-one service where I analyze your ego structure directly. More info is in the description, and I'll also explain more at the end. The reason I'm investing my entire life helping people in this way is because this experience of losing contact with reality is existentially so shocking and so mind-boggling that I know how lonely it feels. It creates a huge sense of isolation because you lose the ability to connect with other people, because all you see is yourself. Everywhere you look feels like you're just interacting with your own mind, and then you are disconnected from all of reality, all your connections with other people. It's like you cannot really be intimate with anybody because aren't you just intimate with yourself? And you can't fathom what other people are going through if you're not going through it yourself. Because the ability for consciousness or experience to give incredibly odd states of experiences is seemingly infinite. And we have labels for these experiences. We say disassociation, derealization, or also awakening. But these words are just words until you're going through it yourself. And then suddenly shit gets real. For example, when I went through the realization that reality is entirely subjective and in my head, and that my sense of agency wasn't as obvious as I thought, I freaked out. I was 14 when I first had this realization on like a visceral level. Like first you think about it for a while and then there's something that happens in your perception that just shifts. And then things become scary because now it's just not an idea anymore. Now it's lived. And I remember just running circles around my room, just trying to understand if I'm even real. I remember looking at my hands and then wondering if I've ever made any decision ever in my entire life, or if I'm just controlled by some cause and effect material force. And with these sort of realizations, it's not just a one and done thing. It's not that you have this experience once and it's over. It follows you for your entire life because it reshapes how your entire structure of mind works. There are many insights into the nature of reality and the nature of the self that loop again and again over multiple periods of your life until you've truly processed and accepted it, not just intellectually, but mainly in your body and in your nervous system. And acceptance is the key word here, really, because what causes self-reflection to loop endlessly is not just overthinking, which is again just a label that removes really the depth of it or the actual mechanics of it. But it's this inability to accept what your reflections are seeing. You do not accept who you are, or you do not accept what reality is. So you keep reflecting on the same issues again and again and trying to solve them logically, trying to put them in some sort of box to contain them. And at the end, you just keep falling into this state of not being able to know. not being able to be certain about if what you're seeing is actually real or if it's actually true. And oftentimes you actually already know. You're just doubting it because you're not accepting it. You're fighting and resisting what is the case, and then trying to look at it from some other angle, or trying to rationalize it because you don't want to accept the logical consequence of it. But thinking is not the same as knowing. That's also the topic of my latest Substack post, how the logical mind just tricks and denies reality again and again, just so it stays in its little bubble of comfort. And it's hard. I don't want to be dismissive of this very problem, because reality is full of really dark stuff. And to say, just accept it or just stop thinking about it is not how this works either. What it requires is a compassionate approach with yourself and honesty towards yourself, to be able to really want to know and be compassionate throughout the process. This is where meditation, also if taken seriously, has immense effects. Especially things like love and kindness meditation can help a lot with acceptance. But there are many tools to bring up that your mind can use to self-reflect in a deeper way that doesn't just stay in this cognitive thinking level and actually takes you to your body and your entire awareness, which is really the entire point of meditation, really. It's just training the mind to not always just think. And with this also, you remove this need to fix yourself or fix the world. Because as much as it feels like you've broken reality apart with too much self-reflection, reality is not apart. The separation is the illusion. You can't separate yourself from reality. If you were, then truly nothing would be real, meaning that you wouldn't exist, and I wouldn't exist, and this entire physical dimension wouldn't exist. But it does. And you don't need to think about it, you just need to touch something and feel something. And it is quite obvious. That's why we are alive, after all. So when I say you exist, it's not about this false notion of self, but about the entirety of your experience field. And these feelings and sensations, they are always there with you. And in the center, you can find what people in these in more like spiritual communities call the true self. It's the silent center which experiences all things, but it's not a thing. It's no one. It's disconnected from thought, it's disconnected from your past, and it's even disconnected from suffering. This is why it is called the true self, because it is what is left when you deconstruct all of reality, break it apart, and then mend it back together. And it's the grounding force that makes everything real and interconnected. And it's this force that self-reflection actually wants to lead you towards, because there you find existential peace. You often need to take reality apart again and again, and then mend it together again and again, until you see. This cycle is like deconstructing and putting yourself back together multiple times, until you understand this entire ebb and flow of life, this constant change that is always there. And then you find something grounding and permanent within yourself. It's what does the self-reflection after all. And from there, all of reality opens up as this incredible miracle that it is. In the description, there's a PDF explaining my ego architecture service, where I analyze the structure of your sense of self in a mechanistic and objective way, all according to a protocol I've developed over the last 3 years. The service costs €250, which is around $290 in the US. I explain everything about it in detail in the PDF. You can find it in the description. There's also my Substack, which gives you free access to the Existential Pathfinder community. Full membership is €7 a month, and it includes deeper written work through my Substack. Hope you have a wonderful day, and don't be too hard on yourself. See ya.